Hello again and welcome back. This is chapter 19, Immortality and Colonization. This chapter is somewhat of a continuation, it is a continuation of the space chapters, the super city chapters, and a little bit of other stuff mixed in, just sprinkled from everywhere. So it's kind of I didn't really want to put it as an update to just one of those, either or those two chapters, so I had to make it its own because it was such a mix of everything else. So I was like, I'll just make a new chapter. Who cares? Anyway, immortality is something that people kind of, I wouldn't say it's been like a goal. For some people, it's been a pretty adamant goal that they've had. There have been many quests from the Spanish conquistadors looking for the fountain of youth and this and that, and there's been a lot of different types of mythology and legends and all that other stuff that has to do with immortality, and nowadays it's kind of more or less known why people age and why we die and how it's difficult to kind of grasp the reasons why or the ways that we would be able to attain immortality. It's nice when we were kind of ignorant back then, and it was all fun and games. We were just looking for some kind of magic. Not that couldn't exist though. I mean, magic would be cool if that was around. I'm just saying. Anyway, so there's a couple different things that go into it. One, just the normal damage that your body receives, whether it be from the sun or radiation or any kind of weird things that damage that you take, scarring or anything like that. There's any number of things that can damage you in such a way that you will slowly degrade and eventually pass on. The other thing that happens is kind of it has to do with the way your cells divide. I guess it kind of, just to dumb it down, what happens is your cells divide, but the copies are kind of imperfect, and I guess it just like clips off this little end of our DNA strands, which is pretty important, I'm assuming, since that's why it makes us age. And just our genetic code and it just start breaking down, and we can't really keep repairing that. But there's a scientist out there, my sister actually told me about this, that predicts that within 40 years from now, we will have found a way to prevent that from happening, or some other way, something like that, to extend our lives to where we're basically immortal, or where we're close to being immortal, or something like that. I think personally, I think that'd be pretty cool. If you ask a lot of people out there, they'll be like, "Oh well, what the heck would I have to do if I were to live a couple thousand years?" Like some people can't find enough things to do, and they only live like 50 or 60 years. And it's like, well, I'm bored now. Like, well, time to die, I guess. I don't know. I'm not like that. Obviously, with all of the chapters I've made, there's a lot of really big ideas and inventions that I have, and I would definitely like to see those come to fruition. Chances are it's probably not going to happen, but yeah, you never know. Who knows? That's kind of one of the reasons why I'm making this chapter. Not necessarily that I'm grasping for immortality, but I think it's a really cool subject that you never know. I think it's completely possible at some point. But so one of the other factors that kind of plays into why we age is gravity. Here on Earth, we see gravity as being 1g, just because that's what we're used to, this planet. That's how we've developed in our knowledge base and everything. So everything in relation to planet Earth is as compared to our 1g. And over time, gravity, it pulls down our faces, it pulls down, like, our organs settle, tons of different things. The muscles in your skin try to weaken, and they just, everything's become a little bit more loose. And not that that's necessarily a bad thing. I'm not making fun of people that are older or anything like that. I'm not the youngest person in the world, so and it's gonna happen to me just like everybody else. But I believe that one way that we can kind of stave off this sort of degradation is through colonization on other planets. And what I mean by that is, like I said at the end of my super cities chapter, somewhere in there, I think I said it, that my super cities are completely contained sphere, and if we were able to perfect that technology, we could send those spheres, well, the materials to build the spheres, onto other planets like our moon or Mars, and then we can end up colonizing them. We wouldn't have to worry about terraforming. One of the benefits to living on a planet like Mars is Mars has less than half the gravity as Earth, I believe. If you weighed about 150 pounds on Earth, you would only weigh about 55 to 60 pounds on Mars. people were like, well, how does that affect aging? What is that going to do? And a lot of people don't realize with the skin pulling down, the organs settling, all the internal functions of your body, like the blood has from your heart has to be pumped around to other different areas, every area actually, and lots of other different fluids and other things, just all this tensile stress that's going on all, and it usually is overcome just by cell division, keeping ourselves fit and stuff like that. But over time, it really has a really, really heavy toll on us, heavy toll, gravity. And if we were to move to a planet with less than half of the amount of gravity, all that stress would not necessarily be 100% lifted, but it would be a huge relief. Imagine, let's say, if you're watching this and you're already like 50, 60, 40, anywhere around there, and you're starting to notice that your legs get a little bit more sore, your joints get a little bit more sore, and it's not necessarily that you're not taking care of yourself or anything like that, it's just that the cartilage in your bones, just all the weight that they've taken on those joints, it just has its toll over time. So if you were to move to another planet like that would had less gravity, you would just have, I don't want to say this instant like revitalization, but it would kind of be like that. You'd be able to play the sports that you weren't able to play anymore. You'd be able to do all sorts of things you hadn't been able to do in a while just because of a mobility issue or a joint issue, a back issue. And also, this helps out with people that have mobility issues that were in accidents or any sort of thing like that. If you or had a work accident, you hurt your back or anything, if you can move over there earlier if you needed to. Not only would the lowered amount of gravity actually help you physically, just the internal organs, everything in your body would just kind of have like a restart. But also, because you'd have this newfound sense of vitality, in our brains, we have neurotransmitters called dopamine and serotonin, and those are basically the neurotransmitters that make us happy. And there's been research to suggest that, well, at least what I've come to understand, I've never seen this actually written down anywhere. I don't really understand why no one's made this connection. They probably have, I just haven't read it. But neurogenesis is a action that takes place in your brain where it actually produces more brain cells. And people with Alzheimer's or any other type of neurodegenerative disease stop that process. They don't produce more brain cells anymore, and that's one of the reasons why they have dementia. That's one of the reasons why they can't remember anything anymore. The place in the brain that actually produces the serotonin and the dopamine, since it has so much to do with psychology, if you age in a certain way and you're less happy with yourself, you're less satisfied with your life just because you think you have these limitations on you just because of your age and this and that. If you were to go to this other place and you didn't have these limitations anymore, I would like to believe that it would uplift your spirits and it would encourage the release of more serotonin and dopamine, and it would encourage more neurogenesis without anything like any sort of antidepressants or anything like that usually increase the levels of serotonin or dopamine in your neural pathways or anything like that. So you wouldn't really, you would have this natural high, this natural revitalization, and that would help out your mind, which would in turn help your body and everything like that, just because it controls your body, obviously. So I'd say if people were to move from the Earth over to, let's say, Mars around the ages of, let's say the age range would be about 40 to 50 years old is when you'd make the move over there, then you would have this renewed vigor, this renewed life, and then you'd spend, I don't know, 40 more years, 30 more years, whatever the decision would be made through research and testing and stuff like that. Obviously, people would figure it out eventually. Let's say if it was another 40 years around the age of 80, let's say you'd move to the moon, which if you weighed about 150 pounds on Earth, you would only weigh about 25 pounds, maybe a little bit less on the moon. So it would be about half of that, the gravity that would be on Mars. So you're taking one half step down, more than one half step down on the Mars, and then you're taking a half step down on the moon, so you have another boost of revitalization, even though you're at such an advanced age at that point. Most people end up having serious mobility issues, serious issues with memory, and a whole slew of different, bodily function issues and stuff like that. Then moving on to the moon would prevent a lot of accidents, a lot of mishaps that I'm sure a lot of you have heard of, like the Life Alert commercials or anything like that. It's like because when an older individual has a really serious fall, people kind of might laugh about it when they hear, but it's really like that's no joke for those people to have a fall like that. And they're like, well, why don't they just get up? I don't get it. It's like, well, when your bones aren't as dense as they used to be anymore, your muscles aren't as dense as they used to be anymore, it's very difficult, especially if you compound that with you injure yourself when you fall, then it becomes just this crippling effect that it has on you, and it's very, very sad and stuff that happens. But if you were in an area like the moon, an area on a planet or a moon satellite like the moon, then you wouldn't have to worry about having a serious fall like that, just because your amount of descent wouldn't have enough force to hurt you. Not only that, but if you were to, and this is a pretty big important factor, when you move onto these other planets, it's really important to keep up with resistance training, because obviously weightlifting isn't going to do it just because the gravity is less anyway, so you really need to hit up the resistance training. So if you maintain your level of health, your level of fitness, hopefully with my physical fitness chapter, nutrition, all that other stuff, then we've developed a sort of cultural phenomenon that where everyone tries to keep themselves a little more healthy, then you'll be much more resilient to those sorts of things. And like I said, you get that other boost of vitality when you moved over the moon. So if you take into account all those other factors that I had in all my other chapters, the nutrition, basically doing all organic food, and that's another thing. You wouldn't really be able to produce red meat on Mars, only because I know it's a red planet. Why can't you have red meat? Because the lowered amount of gravity would lower the muscle mass in the farm animals, and muscle mass is meat, obviously. And if that were to happen, you'd basically just be eating fat, and it's really not gonna be helpful for anyone. Plus, we don't know how that would affect their anatomy actually being raised in zero gravity. Us, we would be born and move there, so it wouldn't affect us. We would have our children and everything before we would go off, and then so it wouldn't affect any of future generations or anything like that. And not only that, but if you were to eliminate red meat, just as a byproduct of not being able to raise it there, having an all organic diet, maybe with very, very rare chance of consuming red meat, would just lower your cholesterol. It would lower, hopefully, your sodium intake, and all those other sorts of things that lead to diabetes, blood clots, cholesterol, hardening arteries, all those sorts of things that cause all those sorts of problems. Then you'd be even healthier. And like I said, with the other chapters, there's less stress, better physical fitness, better nutrition, like I said just then. That should, and advances in medical science, like how they can take skin cells and turn them into stem cells now, and maybe grow new organs if something happens to you, grow all new muscle material, anything like that. Hopefully, hope I'm not extending myself over too much, but we should be able to reach a point where we can extend the human life possibly to 2, maybe even 300 years, if not more.